Hi guys, welcome to your literature paper 2, where we're just going to have a little quick look at Austen's methods. So, how she chooses to tell her story. Now, her methods will be very different from another author's methods, such as a poet who chooses to write using all these flowery language and all these techniques, lots of a coast map. Her methods are slightly different. You'll struggle to find metaphors and similes. You might find alliteration somewhere. You're more likely to find at language level repetition, like nouns that you can comment on. What else might you find at language level? You'll be able to comment on some adjectives. She likes to use a triplet. But at language level, there's not so much that you can say about her methods. There is, obviously, but I want you to look more broadly and don't just drill down on language techniques as a method when it of Austen's, because she uses other methods, and that's what we're going to talk about now. So, right, we've spoken before about her using the epistolary form. If you have an extract and it's a letter, or if it comments on the fact that a character has received a letter or read a letter or is writing a letter, you might want to then draw in some A02 about Austen's use of the epistolary form and how it creates this realism. That's how they communicated at the time, and how letters are used. So letters are used to expose certain events, to create drama, to for character realization. So they might discover something that helps drive the plot along. So think about this use of epistolary form as one of Austen's methods. Another method that Austen uses a lot of is dialogue, the dialogue between the characters. So dialogue's particularly effective because it helps you to build your characterization. It is part of what the different characters say, and it always reveals something about that character's personality. So that is why Austen uses dialogue between characters. It creates this kind of gossipy feel to the novel, and this novel is about gossip and tittle tattle, and all that kind of all the busy goings on and the interactions between high society, really, or the gentry folk or the country folk. And dialogue is really, really important, and it gives her a chance for characters to reveal things about themselves, say silly things, be ironic, because there's lots of irony in some of the dialogue that the characters use, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So yes, dialogue helps create contrasts and juxtapositions between characters. So, for instance, if you have a conversation between Lizzie and Catherine de Bourgh, you'll be able to see the difference in their characters through what they say. So I would like, you definitely to think about Austen's use of dialogue, particularly if you have it in your extract. That could be a method that you could discuss. Another method that she uses to help tell her story, which creates so much humour, is irony. So irony is where something is supposing to be or is happening, or being said, or being done, but actually the opposite is being implied. So the opening of this novel starts with it's a universal it's a truth universally acknowledged that a man with money must want a wife. But that's ironic because a few sentences later we're, sucked into Mrs. Bennet's desire to secure husbands for her daughters. So that's an ironic statement. It's, we can't assume that men must be in want of a wife here. In this situation, it is definitely Mrs. Bennet that is desirous, and she's the one that's trying to secure husbands for her daughters. So kind of the opposite's happening. Other irony is the relationship between Elizabeth and Darcy, which starts out with the characters not liking one another. But then, obviously, as the novel progresses, that changes. Irony allows Austen to present Elizabeth as someone who makes judgments about a character without really knowing them, and so that's ironic. She just takes what Wickham says at face value and she believes it, and she, that is the main irony, really, that she basically prides herself on her opinion and her perception of situations, but she herself is blinded by her own prejudice towards him. Does that make sense? And also sort of Darcy as well. Darcy's supposed to be a gentleman. He's supposed to be this clever, high society figure who's wealthy, who's handsome, who's wise, but yet he says some really silly things in the novel which create an irony. For instance, he's supposed to be a gentleman, but his own proposal to Elizabeth is very ungentlemanly. What a way to ask a girl to marry you by listing all her faults and all the reasons why you've been kind of held back. So again, that's an irony. He thinks he's this gentleman, but actually he's behaved in ways that are really unacceptable and lack tact and sensitivity. Another irony is this idea of Elizabeth's kind of rejection of materialism. She doesn't really seem to be someone that's like trying to grab a husband. She doesn't fit that stereotype. She doesn't fit the stereotype of trying to kind of what can we say, try and make herself like more wealthy and more what can we say, like, I don't know, try to like climb the social ladder. She doesn't want to do that. However, this kind of changes a little bit when she sees Pemberley. And when she sees Pemberley, she does have this thought to herself, because it's so beautiful, it's so naturally beautiful, and it's described in a very tasteful way, that she changes her mind slightly, and she thinks, oh, to be mistress of Pemberley might be something. So she shows a little bit of leniency there towards materialism when she sees the big fat pad. So there's lots of little ironies here. Another one could be, Mr. Collins. He actually crosses over with satire a lot. So does Catherine de Bourgh. So do the sisters. They're all very, satirical characters. For instance, if we talk about the Bingley sisters, they hate the Bennets for their vulgarity. But they themselves are vulgar. So again, that's an irony. They think they're better than the Bennets, but then they're just as bad, and they're very cruel about other people for vulgarity. that they are just as vulgar. Another like point of irony really is in Lady Catherine de Bourgh. I mean, her views are of herself are that she is this graceful lady, that she is the height of sophistication. She's this matriarch, that she really understands what it is like to be sort of moral and respected. However, she is prejudiced. She is self-conceited. Conceited. She's haughty. She's intimidating. You know, she's got so many characteristics that really present her as not a very nice person. So there's lots of satire here. In terms of Mr. Collins, you know, he's quite ironic as well, particularly when Lydia runs off to with Wickham. He says that you ought to forgive them as a Christian, so you ought to forgive Lydia as a Christian, but rather comically says, but don't let them into your sight or don't ever hear of them again. Well, that's not really what forgiveness is. So he's just satirical, and Austen really presents him as just this fool. He's really foolish. Okay, so very, very quickly then, we've got a few different ways now. There is comedy, lots of comedy. Think about what they say and how they look silly. You know, accomplished women, and like Mrs. Bennet and Mary Bennet, you know, with her silliness. Settings is very, very important. It's one of the most important things that you need to consider. So when you get your extract, think, where is this taking place? Because much like the way that, should we say, Shakespeare uses the motif of birds in Macbeth to present different characters. So, for instance, Macbeth is the eagle at the beginning of the play. Lady Macbeth speaks to the raven, which is symbolic of death. The settings in this novel very much tell us about the characters. So settings are used in another way, as another way to tell us about the characters and how they might think and feel and their views. So if we think about Pemberley, no, let's not start with Pemberley. Let's think about Longbourn. Longbourn is this very homely, chaotic, very busy and lively, kind of home, with lots of books, and there's just a bit of freedom here, a freedom of thought, freedom of speech, you know, a natural education. Think about how Lizzie, she didn't have a governess. This is unusual for the time, okay? So Longbourn has that kind of relaxed feeling to it, and therefore the characters that are born there are going to be relatively relaxed. Think about Mr. Bennet. He's practically, you know, horizontal half the time. He's just in his office, in his study, reading his books, you know, just staying away from the craziness. It's a really nice place of like freedom of expression. Longbourn is, and I wonder if maybe that's the reason why Elizabeth could stand up to Catherine de Bourgh at the end of the novel. I think it is. I think the fact that Catherine de Bourgh came to her territory, her ends, her ground, and challenged her, gave Lizzie confidence.